All right, so today we're going to dive into something I think we can all relate to.
Okay.
And that is those sometimes dreaded encounters with difficult customers.
Yeah.
Everyone's had them,
Absolutely.
but you want to be able to turn those interactions around.
Yeah.
And we've got a great script here that's going to give us some really solid strategies
Okay.
for doing just that.
Sounds good.
It's like a cheat sheet, for turning frustration into
Right.
something a lot more positive.
Yeah, it's really remarkable how often a negative situation can actually be transformed
Yeah.
into a real opportunity to make things even better.
Into a positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Strengthen relationships.
Absolutely. All right. So first thing this script emphasizes is understanding
Okay.
where the customer's coming from.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not about you personally,
For sure.
right? They're upset with the situation,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's really easy to feel defensive
Oh, yeah.
when someone's, firing off complaints.
Yeah, it is. And that's why the script, I think, stresses understanding what the root of the problem is.
Right.
Is it a delayed delivery?
Sure.
Did the product not meet expectations, or
Right.
was it just a simple miscommunication?
Right.
When you pinpoint the source of the frustration,
Yeah.
you're already on the path to a solution.
You're already on the path to a solution that makes total sense.
Right.
And that leads right into the next point.
Okay.
Active listening.
Yes.
The script suggests using phrases like,
Mm-hmm.
I understand how that could be frustrating.
Yeah.
Which I admit
Yeah.
can feel a little awkward at first.
Yeah, but I think that simple acknowledgement can often be all it takes to kind of
Right.
de-escalate the situation.
De-escalate the situation, yeah.
When someone feels heard,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that anger just dissipates.
Yeah.
It kind of replaces defensiveness
Oh, yeah.
with a sense of validation.
Right.
And then you can have a much more constructive conversation.
Yeah. That's so true. I've definitely experienced that myself.
Oh, yeah.
Just knowing someone gets it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
And speaking of staying calm,
Okay.
the script is full of tips on how to keep your cool even when things get heated.
Right.
It even calls it a superpower.
I like that.
What do you think about that?
I think it is a superpower because it allows you to respond thoughtfully
Uh-huh.
rather than react impulsively.
Right.
And that prevents things from spiraling out of control.
Yeah, and practically speaking, the script suggests pausing before you respond,
Oh, yeah.
which I know
Take a breath.
I need to do sometimes.
Right.
Take a breath, avoid those knee-jerk reactions,
For sure.
and then keeping your tone neutral,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how the customer's coming across.
Yeah, and building on that, just remember to not take it personally.
Oh, that's so hard.
It is so challenging.
Yeah.
But their anger isn't directed at you.
Yeah.
It's at the company or the product or the situation.
Mm-hmm.
You're a problem solver, not there to absorb all their blame.
Solid advice. All right. So the script goes on to lay out some really specific
Okay.
communication techniques.
Yes.
It starts with acknowledging the issue, showing the customer you understand their concern,
Mm-hmm.
then apologizing. And this is interesting,
Okay.
even if it's not technically your fault.
Right. And that apology isn't about accepting blame.
Right.
It's acknowledging the impact that it's had on them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so sorry this delay has caused you inconvenience. It's about empathy.
Right.
Not necessarily taking the fall for something you didn't do.
Oh, I get that it's showing you care.
Right.
After that, the script suggests asking clarifying questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a detective work phase, right? You're trying to
Yeah.
get to the bottom of what went wrong.
Right.
But what really caught my eye was the emphasis on solutions.
Yes. And not just any solution,
Oh, yeah.
but a specific and realistic one.
Yes.
Vague promises or unrealistic timelines will just lead to more frustration. Specificity builds trust.
So instead of saying, we'll look into it, you'd offer something more concrete.
Right.
Like, let me check with our shipping department, and I'll get back to you with an update
Exactly.
in the hour.
And if a solution isn't immediately available,
Yeah.
setting those clear expectations is so important.
Okay.
Let them know what steps you'll take and when they can expect a follow-up.
Right.
Transparency is key.
Transparency is key, even when you don't have all the answers yet.
Right.
Okay. So we've covered active listening, staying calm,
Mm-hmm.
clear communication.
Yeah.
But what about when you encounter a customer who's just plain aggressive?
Right.
That can be really intimidating.
It can.
The script talks about setting boundaries in those situations.
It does. And it's so important to remember you have the right to protect yourself.
Yeah.
You're there to help,
Yeah.
but not to be subjected to abuse.
Right.
And the script suggests calmly and politely stating your expectations for the interaction.
Like, I understand you're frustrated and I want to help, but I need you to speak to me respectfully.
Exactly.
Something like that.
It sets a clear boundary while still expressing your willingness to help.
Right. And it's important to know when to escalate the situation.
Yes.
If a customer continues to be aggressive or threatening, you don't have to tolerate it.
You don't.
There are procedures in place to handle those situations safely.
Exactly. And the script recommends documenting these incidents.
Right.
Especially if they escalate.
Especially if they escalate.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It provides evidence of what transpired should further action be needed.
Right. For everyone's protection.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about this. How to turn these negative experiences into positive outcomes.
Okay.
It almost sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does, but the script emphasizes the power of turning things around.
Right.
Going above and beyond to not just solve the problem, but leave the customer feeling genuinely valued. What are some specific strategies for achieving that?
Well, following up is crucial.
Okay.
Even a simple email, just making sure everything has been resolved to their satisfaction, it can make a huge difference. It shows you're not just putting out fires.
Right.
You're invested in their long-term happiness.
And the script mentions going the extra mile.
Yes.
Doing something unexpected to show you care.
Uh-huh.
What kind of gestures are we talking about here?
It could be offering a discount on their next purchase.
Okay.
Or maybe even throwing in a little freebie.
Yeah.
Or even just a handwritten apology note.
Right.
Just these small gestures
Yeah.
can have a huge impact.
Yeah.
Demonstrating that you value their business and you're committed to making things right.
I love that it's like turning a potential customer service disaster
Mm-hmm.
into a chance to build loyalty.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it brings us to, I think, one of the most valuable takeaways from this script.
Okay.
The importance of reflection. After any challenging interaction, just take a moment, analyze what went well, what could have been handled differently. What did you learn from the experience?
That's a great point. Even difficult situations can be incredibly valuable learning opportunities.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Understanding the customer's perspective.
Right.
Staying calm. Communicating effectively, setting boundaries, and even turning negatives into positives.
Yes.
It's quite a toolkit.
It is, and it's a toolkit that you can apply,
Yeah.
not just to customer service,
To any conversation.
interactions, but to any challenging conversation in your life.
Wow. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right.
Yeah,
The principles are universal.
they are.
We'll be back after a short break
Okay.
to explore that connection further and how you can use these techniques to navigate any tough conversation.
Sounds good. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
How these strategies for dealing with those difficult customers, they really can be applied to so many other areas of life.
So many other areas of life.
Yeah.
It's true. Think about it, whether you're facing a frustrated customer,
Right.
negotiating a tricky contract,
Yeah.
or even just having a disagreement with a family member.
Right.
A lot of these same principles apply.
Absolutely.
Active listening, staying calm, clear communication, setting boundaries.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little.
Oh,
Let's say you're in a tense meeting at work
right.
and a colleague is being, well, let's just say difficult.
Okay.
How would you apply these customer service techniques to that situation?
Well, first I'd try to understand their perspective.
Okay.
That's driving their behavior. Are they feeling stressed, unheard?
Right.
Maybe they have a totally different vision for the project.
Okay.
Once you understand their motivations,
Yeah.
it makes it much easier to find that common ground.
So instead of getting defensive or immediately shooting down their ideas,
Right.
you take a step back and you say something like, help me understand where you're coming from.
Exactly.
What are your concerns with this approach?
You're showing them that you're genuinely interested in their input, that you value their perspective.
Right.
And even if you ultimately disagree,
Yeah.
just having that understanding can really help you frame your response in a way that's more likely to be heard.
That makes sense. It's like you're diffusing that tension by showing empathy.
Absolutely.
And then the whole staying calm thing.
Right.
That's got to be even harder in like a high stakes work situation.
It's definitely challenging.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, when emotions run high,
Yeah.
Logic tends to fly out the window.
Uh-huh.
So if you can remain calm and composed,
Mm-hmm.
you're not only modeling professional behavior,
Right.
but you're also creating the space for a much more rational and productive discussion.
It's like you're the voice of reason in a storm of emotions.
I liked that.
But sometimes it's not just about staying calm.
Right.
It's about setting boundaries.
Yes.
Let's say this difficult colleague is interrupting you constantly
Okay.
or dismissing your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that assertively
Right.
without escalating the conflict?
That's where that clear and respectful communication is so important.
Okay.
You could say something like, I appreciate your input,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd like to finish my thought before we move on.
Okay.
Or I understand you have a different perspective,
Right.
but I'd like to explain my reasoning before we jump to conclusions.
So you're acknowledging their point of view
Yeah.
while also asserting your right to be heard.
Exactly. And if things start to get really heated,
Yeah.
you might need to escalate the situation to a manager or HR,
Right.
just like you would with a truly aggressive customer.
It's just like you would with a really aggressive customer.
Right.
Okay, so in many cases, if you can approach these challenging conversations with these principles that we've been talking about, the empathy, active listening,
Right.
calm communication,
Mm-hmm.
you can often turn things around.
You can.
I'm curious, do you have any personal examples of how you've used these techniques,
I do.
maybe outside of a customer service context?
Well, just the other day, I had a disagreement with a family member.
Oh,
It was about something pretty trivial, to be honest.
yeah.
But we were both feeling a little stressed,
Sure.
and things started to escalate pretty quickly.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
It's amazing how those seemingly small disagreements can turn into something bigger,
They can.
especially with family. So what did you do?
Well, I caught myself getting defensive,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized I was taking it personally.
Right.
So I just took a deep breath
Yeah.
and tried to shift my focus
Okay.
to understanding their perspective.
Okay.
And I asked some clarifying questions.
Oh.
Really tried to listen without interrupting.
Or like formulating my rebuttal in my head.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And how did that work out? Did it help to de-escalate the situation?
It did. As soon as I started actively listening,
Okay.
that tension started to dissipate.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to have a much more constructive conversation.
Right.
And while we didn't necessarily agree on everything,
Mm-hmm.
we at least understood each other's viewpoints.
That's fantastic. It really highlights how these techniques can be applied to all sorts of interpersonal challenges.
They can.
And it makes me think about that last point in the script,
Okay.
the idea of reflecting on these experiences.
Yes.
How do you personally do that?
Mm-hmm.
And what have you learned from those reflections?
For me, it's often as simple as just taking a few minutes
Okay.
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
just to kind of replay the conversation in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Ask myself what worked well.
Right.
What could I have done differently? Were there any early warning signs that I missed? So it's almost like a debrief with yourself.
Yeah.
You're analyzing this situation to identify patterns and areas for improvement.
Exactly. And, over time,
Yeah.
you start to notice those patterns more readily.
Right.
You become more adept at anticipating potential conflicts
Right.
and navigating them effectively.
So let's bring it back to our listeners who are specifically interested in customer service.
Okay.
What's the one piece of advice you would give them based on all of this?
I would say remember that even the most challenging customer interaction can be an opportunity to build a stronger relationship.
Yeah.
It might not feel like it in the heat of the moment,
Right.
but if you approach the situation with empathy, a genuine desire to help,
Right.
and a commitment to finding a solution,
Yeah.
you can often turn a negative experience into a positive one.
That's such a powerful reminder.
It is.
It's like shifting your mindset from dreading these interactions to seeing them as chances to make a real difference. Now, I'm curious, what about those situations where things just can't be salvaged?
Right.
I mean, there are times when a customer is just completely unreasonable.
There are. And in those cases, it's important to remember that you don't have to sacrifice your own well-being to appease an unreasonable customer.
So there's a point where you have to say enough is enough.
You do.
But how do you do that gracefully?
Right.
I mean, you don't want to lose a customer,
Yeah.
but you also don't want to be walked all over.
It's a tricky balance.
It is.
It requires a combination of assertiveness and empathy.
Okay.
You might say something like, I understand your frustration,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, there's nothing further we can do at this time.
Okay.
I've explored all the possible options,
Right.
and this is the best solution we can offer.
So you're being firm, but also acknowledging their feelings.
Exactly. And if they continue to be unreasonable,
Yeah.
you might need to involve a manager
Right.
or even consider parting ways with that customer.
Yeah.
It's not ideal,
Right.
but sometimes it's necessary to protect your business and your sanity.
Okay, that's really helpful advice.
Yeah.
It's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, we want to help, but we also have to protect ourselves.
Exactly. Finding that balance between empathy and self-respect.
And remember, even in those situations where you have to part ways with a customer,
Yeah.
there are still lessons to be learned.
There are.
Like maybe there were warning signs you missed earlier on.
Right.
Or maybe there are changes you can make to your policies or procedures
Exactly.
to prevent similar situations in the future.
It's all about continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement.
Yeah.
All right, that's some seriously insightful advice.
Thanks.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from active listening and staying calm to setting boundaries and turning negatives into positives.
Right.
I feel like we could talk about this all day,
Me too.
but we're actually just about out of time for this deep dive.
Wow, how time flies.
It really does. But before we wrap up completely, I want to leave our listeners
Okay.
with one final thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
So we've talked about customers, colleagues, even family members.
Right.
But what about those conversations where you have to give someone difficult feedback?
Oh, that's a good one.
Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah. It's tough.
It's always a tricky situation.
Nobody likes to deliver bad news or critical feedback, but it's often necessary,
For growth and
for
improvement.
growth and improvement. Okay, so let's say you need to give an employee feedback on their performance,
Okay.
and it's not exactly glowing.
Right.
How would you approach that conversation using these principles that we've been talking about?
Well, I think first I would just remember the importance of empathy.
Okay.
Put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
How would you feel if you were on the receiving end of this?
Right.
Approach the conversation with a genuine desire to help them improve,
Right.
not to, tear them down,
Yeah, so it's not about being harsh or judgmental.
but rather framing the feedback as an opportunity for growth.
Exactly. And just like with those difficult customers, active listening is crucial here.
Okay.
Give the employee the space to share their perspective, ask clarifying questions, and really try to understand what challenges they might be facing.
So instead of just launching into a laundry list of criticisms,
Right?
you would start by saying something like, I've noticed that you've been struggling with X lately.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about what's been going on?
Exactly.
I-
That opens the door for a much more collaborative conversation where you
Right.
can work together to identify solutions
Right.
rather than you just dictating, what they need to fix.
And then when it comes time to deliver the actual feedback,
Yeah.
how do you do that in a way that's constructive,
Right.
but also honest?
I think it's helpful to focus on specific behaviors
Okay.
rather than making, those sweeping generalizations. For example, instead of saying you're not a team player, you might say, I noticed that you didn't contribute much during the last team meeting.
Right.
Can you tell me what was going on there?
That's much more concrete
Right.
and actionable.
Exactly. And it avoids putting them on the defensive.
Okay.
And remember, even when you're delivering critical feedback,
Yeah.
you can still express confidence in their ability to improve.
Right.
You might say something like, I know you have the potential to excel in this role. I'm here to support you in any way I can.
That's a great point. It's about balancing honesty with encouragement.
Yes. And I think it's also important to remember that feedback is a two-way street.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's an opportunity for both parties to learn and grow.
Yeah.
Be open to hearing their feedback on your management style
Right.
or the company's processes.
That's a good point.
You might be surprised by what you learn.
Okay, so we've covered how to apply these principles to customer service, challenging workplace conversations,
Yeah.
even those difficult conversations with family and friends.
Yeah. Right.
It's amazing how universally applicable these concepts are.
It is, isn't it?
It really is.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to treating others with respect,
Yeah.
empathy, and a willingness to listen and understand.
I love that it's such a simple but powerful message.
It is.
And it's something we can all strive to do better in our daily lives.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive today, remember,
Okay.
Even the most challenging interactions can be transformed into opportunities for growth
Yes.
and connection.
Couldn't agree more.
It's all about shifting our perspective and approaching these situations with curiosity and a genuine desire to learn and connect.
Well said.
So the next time you find yourself facing a difficult conversation, remember the tools we've talked about today. Take a deep breath.
Okay.
Listen, actively communicate clearly, and don't forget the power of empathy.
You got it.
You might be surprised by the positive outcomes that result.
You never know.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights today and are feeling empowered to handle those tricky conversations with grace and confidence.
That's what we want.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.